different setup. I'm usually here for author events like this, and now we have this great opportunity to have a conversation. I'm Kristen Swarth, and I'm the director and CEO of the St. Louis County Library. Aw, thanks. We are so excited to welcome you to tonight's Civil Dialogues event presented in partnership with the University of Missouri's Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy and the St. Louis chapter of the Mizzou Alumni Association. Okay, who's a Mizzou grad? Raise your hand. All right, me too. I'm a Mizzou alum. I have a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in public administration, and I'm also teaching at the Truman School of Public Affairs, which is kind of in partnership with the Kinder Institute. We talk all the time because we have the same goals for teaching students about how to operate and live and talk and have conversations in our world today. Our topic for this evening is finding common ground, strategies for civil dialogue and healing the divide. That sounds good, right? We're all excited about that. We care deeply about this, and we want to work towards this every day through our library services in the St. Louis community. So when the Kinder Institute approached us about hosting this innovative panel and facilitated conversation, we were an immediate yes. We have not hosted a program ever before like this. Now, how many of you have been to an author event? Raise your hand if you've been to an author event. Oh, welcome back. So now you're here for something different. We're so excited to see such an enthusiastic response to this program, and we're really excited to bring this important conversation to our library audience. And to get us started, I'm now very pleased to welcome to the stage Hannah Murray, University of Missouri's Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement for St. Louis. Let's give her a round of applause.
Good evening. I am Hannah Murray. Like Kristen said, I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement for the St. Louis market. It's a privilege for me to be here tonight, and we're really excited to be partnering with the Kinder Institute. Like she said, I do work in St. Louis, connecting Tigers across one of our largest and most passionate alumni communities. This is really such a lovely evening and a nice time for us to be here as we kick off a new partnership with the Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy through this Civil Dialogue series, bringing thoughtful, engaging conversations like the one tonight to communities across the country. And starting right here in St. Louis is something we're incredibly proud to be a part of. A big thank you to our hosts at the St. Louis County Library and to Mizzou alumna Kristen Swarth for welcoming us into this beautiful Clark family branch. It's the perfect setting to come together and share perspectives. Before we get started, I would love to invite you all to stay involved with our Mizzou alumni community here in St. Louis. We have lots of fun events coming up this spring and summer, including our signature event on May 9th, which is the Black and Gold Gala. We had our first one last year, was our inaugural event, and we're looking forward to another fantastic evening. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. Jean Becker is a New York Times best-selling author, former Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush following his presidency, and co-founder of Civil Dialogues, alongside fellow Mizzou alumna Linda Lorelle. So tonight really does feel like a bit of a homecoming. As a diehard Cardinals fan, I know she feels right at home here in St. Louis, and we're especially glad to have members of her family joining us as well. Please join me in giving a warm St. Louis and Mizzou welcome to Jean Becker.
Okay, I have to ask, if you're related to me, please stand up. Where are you? Oh, hello, hi. Hi, cousins and my niece, I'm sorry. I just had to say hello. I'll give you a hug later. Anyway, thank you for coming tonight. What a great turnout. It's such a beautiful night. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, so thank you for coming. And just to show you how excited I am to be here, I was at the Bill Clinton Presidential Library in Little Rock, Arkansas last night, and had to rent a car and drive 6 hours today to get here by myself. So that, I knew that I needed to drive a little faster. I will confess to you that driving through the Arkansas, I grew up on a farm, and driving in Missouri, about 2 hours west of here, and driving through the Arkansas farmland and then southern Missouri. And I became obsessed with civil dialogues in these little towns. And I found myself wanting to stop at every diner and every bowling alley and say, now who are you? What do you think? What are you worried about? Why do you vote the way you do? And I thought, they will call the police if I just start dropping in. And I knew I was in trouble, and this is true, this did happen. I started talking to the people in the country cemeteries. And I would look over and say, I wonder what you all think. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to get to St. Louis. So here I am. And yes, I am a diehard Cardinal fan, and I'll be honest, I live in Houston. If the Cardinals were home tonight, I wouldn't be here. Anyway, let's talk about civil dialogues. While serving as President Bush's chief of staff, I became acquainted with Linda Lorelle, who was the anchor of Houston's NBC affiliate for 17 years. She was one of President Bush's favorite local journalists. If he had something he wanted to say, he said, Jean, get Linda over here. And in the process, she and I became friends. Nearly 4 years ago, she and I were sitting in a bar. Actually, that's a lie, we were having lunch. But it's such a better story if I say we were in a bar. Our lunch conversation was dominated by how worried we were about our democracy, about the civil discourse we were seeing on the news every single night, and among our friends and among our family members. So we began a conversation with the heads of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, the foundations of the LBJ and Clinton libraries, and the Kinder Institute. And we finally kicked off our civil dialogue series at the Baker Institute at Rice University in Houston about three and a half years ago. Since then, we've talked about immigration, climate change, the importance of bipartisanship, the Middle East, and what the Constitution really means. If nothing else, you cannot call us cowards. The idea of civil dialogues is to give you a chance to listen to experts who can talk about various sides of these issues. After all, every issue has two sides. And then give you a chance to ask your questions, voice your concerns, and make your opinion known. No shouting, no name calling, no vitriol, just dialogue, civil dialogue. Tonight, we're not going to tackle a specific issue. Instead, we're just going to tackle the issue of civil dialogue itself. Given what's going on in the country, we all probably could do a little better. That would include me. A few months ago, I was asked to go on CNN about the demolition of the East Wing, where I had an office for 4 years when I was one of Barbara Bush's deputy press secretaries. I told my friend Jamie Gangel, who called me, that I would be happy to come on the air and talk about the demolition of the East Wing, as long as she and her producer understood that every other word would probably be the F word. There was a long silence, and she said, do you know any other former East Wingers who would be willing to come on CNN today? I had a recommendation, and she went on, and she did not say the F word. So yes, I need civil dialogue too. I sort of agree with this message in a bottle sent to the shipwrecked passengers on Gilligan's Island. I can't see the screen. Can you all see Gilligan? Where's my friend Evan? Do you see it? I saw that on Instagram, and I just, I think it's a good message. Don't come home, stay there. We all need to figure out how to talk to each other, more importantly, how to listen to each other, and how to disagree without shouting or belittling, or worse, pulling out a gun. Enough. We can do better. We have to do better. And the good news is our panel will help us get there. But before I turn the program over to them, there's another thought I would like to share. Learning how to be civil does not mean we should not express what we think. Just the other day, I saw a meme that said, "We live in a world where the intelligent must keep quiet so the stupid won't be offended." No, no, no. First of all, I should point out that just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean they're stupid. They may be misguided, but they're not stupid. Specifically, I want to challenge you to think about our expectations of our elected leaders. It is, after all, an election year. I don't care who you voted for, I don't care who you plan to vote for, or what party you belong to. But every voter on both sides of the aisle should have expectations of their elected leaders. I was thinking a lot about this standing in the TSA line in Houston for 2 hours a couple weeks ago. So I challenge you to get involved. Years ago, I was whining one day to President Bush about local and state politics, and I told him I was just done. I'm done. I think I told him, "Sir, you need to know that your chief of staff is no longer a Republican." And he looked at me and he said, "You were never that good of one to begin with." Anyway, he asked me when was the last time I attended a precinct meeting, the last time I attended a political rally or volunteered for a campaign. And the answer was, it had been a few years. So get involved. Find a candidate who you truly believe deserves your support and meets your expectations, and then vote. And number one on your list of expectations, our leaders should show the willingness to do what is right, to show moral courage and fortitude, and to show character. I was blessed to work for someone who was all that and more. In 1990, President Bush was determined to balance the budget. In order to do so, he did something that so few politicians do today. He compromised. When did that become a dirty word? The word compromise. He agreed to a minimal tax increase in exchange for budget cuts from the Democrats. Early in the process, while meeting with his economists on what it might take to balance the budget, he wrote the following in his diary: "I think some of these proposals could mean a one-term presidency, but it's that important for the country. It's the right thing to do." Can you think of many leaders who could write that in their diaries today? Every single one of them should be able to write that in their diary. Unfortunately, he was right. The budget deal did cost him re-election in 1992, the same budget deal which the Wall Street Journal later credited with the economic boom of the 1990s. It was right for the country, but it was not right for him, not personally. And speaking of Bill Clinton, that was the man he lost the election to in 1992, they became famously known as the odd couple. Evan, you can show the next photo. That is them standing on the beach in Galveston, Texas, after Hurricane Ike came ashore. The two of them became very close friends. Mrs. Bush would tell you that President Bush was the father that Bill Clinton never had. They literally raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for hurricane relief, disaster relief. When Hurricane Harvey dumped 40 inches of rain on Houston in 2017, all the former presidents came together to help raise money. Evan, if you could show that photo. I want you to ignore the woman in the back who appears to be photobombing the presidents of the United States. I don't know who she is. I'm trying to get rid of her. I love the message this photo conveys: a camaraderie where differences are set aside for what's right, for what's best for the country. This is who we are. This is who we're supposed to be, and this is who we need to get back to doing. In his eulogy of President Bush, historian John Meacham said, "It was and is the most American of creeds, Abraham Lincoln's better angels of our nature, and George H.W. Bush's 1,000 points of light. They are companion verses in America's national hymn. For Lincoln and Bush both called on us to choose the right over the convenient, to hope rather than to fear, to heed not our worst impulses, but our best instincts." That is what we need to do. I'd like to share with you, before I leave the stage, a quote that I recently saw about the importance of civil dialogue. It's actually a prayer that I saw a month or so ago. We live in times of fear and division. Sometimes we act as if we were alone, building walls that separate us from one another, forgetting that we are brothers and sisters. Send us your Spirit, Lord, to rekindle with us the desire to understand one another, to listen, to live together with respect and compassion. Give us the courage to seek paths of dialogue, to respond to conflict with gestures of fraternity, to open our hearts to others without fear of differences. Make us builders of bridges, able to overcome borders and ideologies, able to see others through the eyes of the heart, recognizing in every person an inviolable dignity. Help us create spaces where hope can flourish, where diversity is not a threat, but a richness that makes us more human. That's Pope Leo. I know, it's the words of Pope Leo. When I read those words, I almost felt like they were written for us, and I'm trying to reach him to see if he would like to join Civil Dialogue, but he's not answered any of my phone calls. Anyway, he's a White Sox fan, so who cares? We may not have Pope Leo, but we have Linda Lorelle. Linda's an Emmy Award-winning journalist who, as I said, anchored the NBC News in Houston for 17 years. Like me, she went to the University of Missouri School of Journalism. She got her master's. She is CEO and executive producer of Linda Lorelle Media, a video production and communication consulting firm. Linda, I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Hi, everybody. It is so wonderful to see a packed room. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for coming out today. And it is really exciting and fun for me to be back in St. Louis. My first TV job was at KMOV, just down the road a little bit. So yeah, back in the days of Julius and Larry and Robin, yeah, I was one of the reporters, a baby reporter here in St. Louis from 1987 to 1989. And lived into Bolivar Place, and anyway, I love St. Louis, and it's great to be here again. So, Jean, as you know, in the fall of 2022, as you and I had lunch together and commiserated about our polarized democracy, Pope Leo, of course, had not yet offered that prayer because he wasn't even Pope yet. But I agree. His words speak to the core of what we set out to do. Give us the courage to seek paths of dialogue, to open our hearts to others without fear of differences. Make us builders of bridges. So here we are, no longer sitting on the sidelines, but firmly in the arena, helping to build those bridges through this little nonprofit we co-founded called Civil Dialogues. You, a white woman who grew up on a farm in mid-Missouri and worked for a Republican president for more than 2 decades. I, a black woman who grew up on the south side of Chicago with firm Democratic roots. It's safe to say that we don't agree on every issue, but we have great respect, admiration, and love for each other. And we both deeply love this country. Common ground to build upon, not only for the two of us, but for all of us. There is a real hunger for what we're doing here with Civil Dialogues, and we are proud to be among hundreds of organizations that are working to help get us out of our silos and bring us closer together. In the last few months, I have to say, there's been a bit of an interesting shift. Those who have asked to work with us are less interested in having civil dialogue about a specific topic and more interested in understanding the dynamics of how to have a civil dialogue, regardless of topic. And that brings us to our topic today, finding common ground, strategies for civil dialogues and healing the divide. Got a question for you. How divided are we? A moment ago, as I began speaking, I used the word polarized, a word we hear routinely and take for granted as an accurate description of the current state of our democracy. How accurate is it? Are we really as divided as we feel? It's an interesting and important question that we will explore with our panelists and all of you as we embark upon our conversation and quest to find common ground. Now, following the panel discussion, Jean and I will join you in the audience to take your questions and comments, and then you'll have an opportunity to practice how to have a challenging conversation with someone who might be on the other side of your beliefs, sitting right across the table from you. If you're joining us online, you'll be placed in breakout rooms for this portion of the program. Now, once we get there, together we will go over some guidelines, conversation agreements about how we will engage with each other. There are copies of the agreements on your tables. So I want you to keep all of that in mind and be thinking about your questions and comments as our panel conversation unfolds. And with that, it is time for me to introduce our panelists. Kristen Sorth, you met just a moment ago, but now I'm going to tell you a little more about her. She is the St. Louis County Library's first female director, holding that position for the last 13 of her 25-year tenure. Under her leadership, the library's multi-million-dollar capital campaign led to renovating and replacing 21 facilities in 11 years, while also providing innovative programming, cultural enrichment, and resources for the region. Kristen has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in public administration from Mizzou, and a master's degree in library science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Please welcome Kristen Sorth. Bennett Bockert is a lifelong resident of Wildwood, Missouri, and is currently studying history and constitutional democracy as a freshman at the University of Missouri-Columbia. After college, he plans to study law and practice as a constitutional lawyer. Please welcome Bennett Bockert. Bella Gomez is a senior at Washington University right here in St. Louis, studying global and Latin American studies with a focus on public health, environmental justice, and global development. Her work explores how civic dialogue and community engagement can bridge divides and rebuild trust around critical public health issues. At WashU, she is part of the Gephardt Institute, a Danforth Scholar, and student leader advancing initiatives in health equity and civic collaboration. Please welcome Bella Gomez. Jay Sexton is a professor of history and director of the Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy at the University of Missouri. An award-winning author of several books, his work explores how international connections and conflicts have shaped American democracy and its political history. He has learned much, I must say, about how to navigate tribal hatred by virtue of being a KU alum who lives and breathes Jayhawk basketball, but lives and works in Columbia, Missouri. And he takes booze from Tiger Faithful in good spirits. Please welcome Jay Sexton. Okay, so as we get started, I actually want to ask all of you a question. What would you say is the percentage of either side, extreme left or extreme right? What is the percentage of the American population that holds extreme views? Just shout out a number. What percentage do you think holds extreme views? 4, 20? 5 to 10, 15. You're 30%. That is the number. So interestingly, this is according to research from More Common. This is from March of 2025. So 55% is the estimated proportion of Republicans and Democrats holding extreme views, but the actual percentage is 30. And that's actually good news because sometimes we feel more divided than we actually are. There's more common ground than there might appear to be. Jay, of course, I'm going to start with you and ask you to help us sort of put into context the moment that we're in from an historical perspective, especially when you hear those statistics.
It's great to see everyone here, and what a wonderful question. I mean, 30%, that's not that bad. I mean, I hope that's what everyone took from that number. But I would say that one thing is about where we sit in the present in long kind of historical perspective. We don't know where we're at in the present. And we know that because people in the past didn't really know where they were. One of the things that's interesting is to look back at past moments and look at the big debates that animated and divided Americans. And sometimes you're like, yeah, they were right. They should have been debating slavery in the run-up to the Civil War. That was a big moral issue. But other times, like, what was the biggest issue in the late 19th century? It was about whether or not the United States should be on the gold standard. And we look back at that and we're like, man, that was kind of weird. Why were they so divided about that? The stakes of that debate weren't nearly as big as the stakes of some of the earlier ones. And I often wonder that question, Linda, about where we're at in the present. Are the things that divide us, are these the big moral questions, or are these the ones that in 50 years' time historians are going to look back and kind of puzzled at why we're so divided? One more point, and then I'll clam up. But Linda was saying something about how, maybe we're not that divided. And if you look at like opinion polling on some of the big issues, guns, immigration, tariffs, even the biggest debate of them all of our era, which is abortion. If you look at those, actually most people fall within a sort of center of a Venn diagram where they agree generally on a compromise solution to all of them. So it makes me think that maybe it's not the policies and the issues that are the big problem in our era. It's actually how those policies and issues are filtered through intermediaries, politicians, the media, our social institutions, which are becoming more and more fragmented and less inclusive. I mean, how many of you, Jean was just talking about you should volunteer in political campaigns. I think that's a great idea. You should also get involved in social institutions and organizations, trade unions, churches, something that brings Americans of different perspectives and backgrounds together. And I think the solution to our problems are actually not to try to talk more about the issues, but actually to think about what are the social formations that lead to a healthier democracy.
And to that end, I want to bring in Bella and Bennett to talk a little bit about what you're seeing on your campuses. What are the kinds of conversations that you guys are having about this moment that we're in? I mean, people of my generation I feel disappointed in us in the world that we're leaving you, to be quite honest. And I worry that your future is not as bright as my future was when I was your age. What are you worried about? And what are the conversations that you're having, and how are you dealing with whatever conflicts come up within those conversations?
Yeah, I'm happy to get started. Hi, everyone. I think as a student at WashU currently, and not coming from the state of Missouri, I'm from Florida originally, so I'm a transplant to the area. I love your city, though. I think students are really worried that people are going to forget how to build relationships and talk to each other. I think it's really easy, at least in our generation, to hide behind a screen or to use social media's anonymity to really put out your ideas but then never claim ownership for them. And so I think students are really worried that that's just going to be the way of communication moving forward, and people aren't going to be able to have side conversations on the street or at a local coffee shop just because it came up in conversation and it's okay. I think, on the contrary, though, I do understand the worry about the future and sort of the future that's being left to young people. And I would say to young people that we don't need to claim that. I think there's a real opportunity here to change the narrative and to allow for young people to mobilize in ways that I'm seeing on my campus, and I'm sure you're seeing on yours too, where we can actually have real conversations and sort of be change makers in this new space and allow for civic dialogues like we're learning about today, or even just a casual conversation where you agree to disagree, and that becomes the norm. So I think there's the fear that we're losing and we're moving away from a norm of, honest and authentic conversation, but there's also a real opportunity to try again and understand that we're all really stressed about many different issues across our nation and across our world, but there's not a need to put ourselves in silos and remove ourselves from conversations. This is the time to start building networks and talking to people that you disagree with.
That makes me feel so much better. Not that it's about me trying to feel better, but I love your perspective. And Bennett, I would love for you to pick up on this. In our call, as we were preparing for this panel, you shared a little bit about the Democracy Lab, yes. And you shared an example of a close friend who is on the opposite side of what you believe. Tell that story to the audience and help us understand how you navigated that.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, first off. As a freshman at Mizzou, they offer, it's called a freshman interest group. And so Kinder's version of that was the KIDL, so the Kinder Institute Democracy Lab. And through this is where I met some of my closest friends I've made since coming to college. But one of them, complete opposite side of the aisle. And, you know, we had civil dialogue discussions in this class. That was the whole point. But coming out, obviously, what we're talking about is going to spill. And so I remember it was over foreign policy, and this was one of the first times we had ever truly, gotten into what our politics were and what we personally believed, and didn't have fear of retribution. We knew each other well enough. And we started the conversation with, we completely disagree, but we want what's best for the country. And at the end of the day, we're not going to hold each other, or anything we say against each other. We want what's best. And so we had a 30-minute talk. There was some yelling. We didn't agree with each other. And by the end of it, I'm going to be honest, I think we were more firm in our foundations, but there was an understanding of why we both believed what we believed. And there was respect. There wasn't agreement, but there was respect.
So that why we believe what we believe is the story. There's always a story behind however anyone comes to a particular issue that helps them see the world through that lens. That's what their personal perspective is. And so that's one of the reasons why I think sharing our stories is so important. And I'm going to pick up on that in a minute, but I want to get to Kristen, and because we've had the word media and communications already come up several times just in the first few minutes of this conversation. And I'm really curious to get your perspective, especially from your position as a library director, and you convene conversations like this and all kinds of conversations with authors and, you know, celebrities and leaders. And what are you seeing and hearing here in the library, and how does media play a role in that?
Yeah, I think, so the library is really a level-setting place for people. Everybody's welcome here. We're interested in hearing different sides and different conversations and different opinions. But I think, like we've all said, people are worried, and there's a real thirst to have conversations around that, whether it be an author event or a program like this, or other things that we're hosting at the library. And what better place than to come to the library for those kinds of conversations? That was really the beginning of the public library. I also think the whole search for the truth in what we're reading is so important, and that is really fundamental to public libraries. We're here to help people find good sources of information that they can rely on. And there are so many people, I think, that see a headline, forward it to whoever, and never read the article. And I admit that I have done that. My son is in college, and he was like, "Mom, this is not a thing. You just forwarded me something that is not a thing." So I think, we want people to lean in to the library and come to us and say, "I'm looking for information on this." And we're so lucky to have information for every side of an issue, and that's really what we're here to do. I'm sure many of you have seen that libraries have become sort of this lightning rod for various conversations, and what we say is that we have information for everybody, and we want to keep continuing to do that. And we also wanted to have good relationships with the media, because we want to get our stories out there, and we want them to report the stories that people need to hear. So I think media is such an important part of what we're doing, and we talked about this a little bit on the panel, but these students here don't get their information the way that we do. My son is not watching KSDK at 7:30 in the morning every day. That's not where they're getting their information. So the information cycle just becomes so incredibly important, and we want the public library to be part of that.
So let's talk about that. Where do you guys get your news and information from? Either one of you.
Yeah, I would say the majority of my news and media comes either through local university channels, so our student newspaper that likes to report on things that are going on, and then of course my phone is constantly going off with social media alerts, news alerts. I subscribe to
But what are the sites? What sources? What are your sources is the question.
It depends on where. So like I study Latin American studies, so I go to Al Jazeera for news on Latin America, or I go to CNBC for news on maybe like more international affairs focused policy debates.
Okay.
But typically I'm pulling from news sources that are not regionally or locally affiliated with the area of interest because I want the external perspective. So like Al Jazeera is not focused on Latin American news, but if I want authentic news about Latin America, that's where I go.
How about you, Bennett?
All right, this is gonna sound horrible, but a lot of the stuff I'll see will be on social media, and I'll go and be like, I'm really curious how accurate this is. And there's a website that I've been using since like sophomore year of high school that my journalism teacher suggested. It was called All Sides, and so I would look up the topic, and I would get a middle view, a middle-leaning article or op-ed piece, and then one from the right, one from the left. And if I had time, I would try and read all three. Gives you a pretty solid idea of what people are thinking. But if not, I would just read that middle one, and that's how I get most of my news.
I'm so glad you brought up All Sides. All Sides is actually one of the partners of Civil Dialogues, and its co-founder, John Gable, has been on many of our panels. So the site is allsides.com, and as Bennett said, you can go to the site and you can see any news story covered from the left, the right, and the center perspective. You can look at the headlines and almost tell where they're coming from. Then you read the story, and you can make up your own mind about what you think the truth is. There's several sites that are like this now, but All Sides is one of the oldest, and it's a great resource. I want to pick up a little bit on what Kristen was saying about the role of public libraries and it being a place where people can come and get books about different perspectives. Well, we're living in a time now where there are banned books. I can't believe I'm actually saying that, but there are banned books. There is an effort to rewrite some of our history. So as an educator, as a professor, how are you dealing with that, and what's the answer to your students who are concerned and those who might not be concerned and think that everything that's happening is fine?
Well, I mean, that's one of those things that really, we have to hold firm on. I mean, the liberal idea, classic liberal idea of the free exchange of ideas. And that might mean that there's some bad ideas out there, but the best way to deal with bad ideas is to not try to ban them or put them away, but is to have them defeated in the open kind of public square. So I think it's really important that public institutions of education and institutions like libraries and so forth hold the line on that. That's an important core belief, I think, that we have as educators. But hey, look, I mean, public institutions and the way that they've been chipped away at over a half century. I mean, this isn't something new to this particular moment in time. Our public institutions have been in decline, except sometimes you see ones that aren't in decline, like this wonderful, beautiful library. And you think about the actual configuration of space and how important that is to the functioning of a healthy sort of civic fabric or democratic idea. One more point here, news. Think about news historically. One thing that's always kind of interesting is we're always like, the burden is on the individual citizen. You got to go to the right website, or you have to go to All Sides. And actually, you should go to All Sides if you haven't. I think that's a really good site. But my point here is historically, news wasn't always something that was consumed privately. It wasn't like a privatized thing. In the 19th century, which was what I study, the way news was most often consumed, because not everyone wanted to buy the newspaper, right? So one person would buy the paper, and they would meet in the public space, like the equivalent of this space, and someone would read the newspaper out loud, and then everyone would talk about it. And they would negotiate the differences, and they might divide into different factions on particular issues, but it was a collective civic process, the consumption of news. And so to your point about the free exchange of ideas and the importance of public institutions, I mean, American history shows the importance of that over time, and it's great to see an institution like this kind of in that old tradition.
So, Kristen, as the director of the library, and you've been here, in many roles for many years, and I'm curious to know what your perspective is now about this moment, having seen where we were, say, 10 or 15, 20 years ago, and now you're having to deal with banned books and people searching for truth and alternative facts. And so help us understand how you're dealing with that.
Well, I think in general, librarians can't believe we're in this place again. Like, we thought that the whole banned book conversation was, over. And so here we are again. That being said, I think public libraries are so good at adapting and changing and reacting to the things that the public needs. And some of that is, to what we've talked about, a space that feels safe and comfortable and welcoming, which is why this building is set up the way it is. It's really a place, it's a library. We have books and we have story time. It's also a place to hang out. You can come here and hang out and work and have conversations with people. That is an important part of what we're doing, but then we've got this noise that is constantly around us, and I think everybody kind of ebbs and flows. Like, our deputy director is here, and I think we're like, okay, it's all around us, but it's not here to us yet. And then we'll get a letter, or we have a month where we're celebrating, it's Pride Month, or it's Black History Month, or, and then I say this, and I am not kidding, like, I have had people cut up their library cards and mail them to me because of what we're doing. And what we're doing is just providing information, just being a center of community, trying to show a reflection of people in the programs and the books that we have, regardless of what those people look like or who they love, all the things. So it is such a strange time. We're kind of in a little bit of a bubble in St. Louis County, but just over the river in St. Charles, they've had a lot of discussions about that. I think it's very stressful for our employees. I think our employees are the kindest, nicest, most giving people, and they have, just like 2 weeks ago, we had someone come in and yell at one of our employees for wearing a mask. Like, you don't know what that person's situation is, and who cares? Just let them wear a mask. So I think for library directors and administrators, we're doing our job. We're making sure we're doing the right things for the community. I really worry about the impact on our employees who are frontline, printing things for people. We have social workers at the library. We're giving out diapers. We're doing all these things for people. We're checking out books, we're making book recommendations, and then people come in, and the dialogue that we're talking about is often kind of shouted back at the people that work in public libraries.
It's so interesting. So I'm going to make a comment. I'm going to share with you what I alluded to a moment ago, and then I'm going to come down into the audience and get some questions. So the mask thing is what it sort of leads into the story that I want to share. I went to an event recently where I was seated next to an older gentleman. We were having dinner. It was a conference, and we were seated next to each other, and we were having a nice conversation. And then he started talking about COVID and shared with me that he had not been vaccinated. And I said, okay. I said, I was first in line, one of the first in line to get vaccinated. And I said, so tell me your story. Why did you choose not to get vaccinated? And you will never, in a million years, guess what he said to me? His reluctance to get vaccinated dated back to his service in Vietnam. And he felt betrayed by the country. And he no longer trusts the government. And he has not trusted anything that the government says, does, especially when it comes to public health, because of his experience in Vietnam. And I looked at him and I said, I get it. I understand your point of view. I'm still going to get vaccinated when the next booster comes out because I believe in the science and I'm going to do that. I said, and by the way, did you get COVID? He has long COVID. Unfortunately, he has family members, his kids got vaccinated. He and his wife did not. So there was a family split over it. But my point here is that there is a story behind every person's perspective on what it is they believe. And you can't guess why somebody's wearing a mask. It might be because they have an illness. You can't guess. But if you, and here's the other thing that he said. He said, you're the first person to actually have this conversation with me. He said, most people will not even talk to me about COVID and vaccines and why I chose not to get vaccinated. But we had the conversation. He'll never get a vaccine. I'm going to get the next one. And we had a 30-minute wonderful conversation, and my eyes were open because I thought of something differently than I had before. And I think that's the point. So, okay, it's time for you guys to get involved. Jean is going to pick up a microphone. Here, Jean, you take this one. I'll get another one. And I want to know what your comments, your questions are. Thank you. Raise your hand. Oh, yes, okay. All right, here we go. Yes.
I have a new word this year, and I want to share it with everybody. It's called curiosity. And when you don't agree with the person across the table from you, be curious, just like what you said. Be curious about who they are. Be curious about why they think the way they do. And you don't have to agree with them by the end of the day, but somebody's heard them, and you've heard their story.
Thank you. Absolutely, absolutely. Go, Jean.
Question over here.
Yeah, sometimes I think we obsess too much about our divisions, and that makes them worse. I mean, I was rather thrilled to hear it was a third or 30% who were in another realm, so to speak. I mean, when you go back and look at the American Revolution, a third of the people here wanted to be separate from England, a third of the people did not, and a third of the people didn't care. So maybe we need not obsess too much about division.
Okay, who wants to, Jay? I think you should respond to her. I'm volunteering you.
Well, she's preaching to the choir about that. And I'll tell you what, I'm so glad that the loyalists are getting a shout out in your commentary about the revolution. I don't know if it was mentioned, but I'm American and I'm also a British citizen. I took British citizenship up. I'm always like, don't forget about the loyalists. Loyalists were a third of those in the colonies. Of course, their fate, it's not necessarily a happy story what happened to them. But that's a story for a different time.
Okay, we have another one here. I
Hi,
got it.
thanks. Hi there, Peter Schrappen. My son, August Iron, from Seattle. It's really exciting to see such a full room here.
Yes.
Just curious, perhaps for you, Linda or Jean, are you familiar with the Rotary Way to have a conversation? The Rotary Club has a process they go about having conversation. I was just wondering if that's been incorporated into your style or your approach.
I'm not sure what the Rotary Club approach is, but the approach that we're using is through living room conversations, and that's what you're going to experience in a few minutes.
Great. I think I just pulled up really quick. It's active listening. It's open-ended questions, balanced dialogue.
Yep.
Curiosity and rapport, authenticity.
Yes, all those things are most definitely a part of it. Yes.
We have a question on this side.
Okay.
We got to play
Go.
fair here.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm all for fair. I have a question and an observation. I think the observation stems from those days that I was wandering the corridors of Jesse Hall, and they were kind enough to award me a minor in physics and philosophy. So Socratically, I want to indicate that life is a pendulum. And as we swing from one side to the other, we have to find a way to cope with the extremes to meet in the middle. That is pure Socratic. My question is, and this is for everybody on all sides, how do you find ground when you're dealing with a cult? Somebody want to answer that? Say one more thing about this cult aspect.
You have 20 seconds.
I'm all on the clock here, I see it now. Jordan Klepper had made a living out of going to Trump rallies and discussing the obvious inane comments that were being made and he came to the conclusion that they don't care. They have no sense of grounding themselves in truth.
We'll let one of our panelists, or Linda, tackle that.
I think that part of where we are right now is that we don't have empathy for each other as humans. Somewhere along the way, we have gotten into these silos where we see each other as the other, and that we don't believe in the basic human dignity of every single person. And the media, you know, having been a part of it for a good chunk of my career and still being engaged in it on an independent level, the media play a huge role in this, because what's happening is we are able to go and get information from a news source that is going to reinforce what we already believe. And so we don't have to see the other side if we don't want to. And that has entrenched us in where we stand, and it makes us want to just stay there. But the only way, I believe, that we get out of it is by doing what we're doing right now, which is by talking to each other face to face, eyeball to eyeball, not through a screen, seeing how your words land on a person who's sitting across from you, making you think twice about what you say and how you say it and what your purpose is. This is one of the things that I think we need in order to get out of it. Yes, you had a question, didn't you?
I did.
Yes.
A comment about the curiosity, and you probably just spoke right to my comment, but I have lost friends on Facebook because of being curious on their opinions, and I ask, and they start calling me names, and it's like, you know, I respect you, we used to work together, and I think highly of you, and I'm trying to understand your side, and I don't know if it's the screen anonymity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I pretty much am off Facebook now, except for posting cute pictures of flowers or something. So I would suggest that when that happens, invite that person to have a cup of coffee and go sit down and talk face to face. Don't try to have that conversation on Facebook. It's futile. It's not going to get you anywhere. Jean?
Okay.
Hi, I have an idea that I'm interested in your thoughts on, which is that the whole idea that an issue has two sides actually feels like part of the problem to me. Like, we as a community, society, face challenges and problems, and if we want to solve those problems, we need to work together to align on what are the real issues, what are the root causes of those issues, and what are possible solutions to them. And it isn't like there's an A or a B and pick one, and you have to pick one or the other. It's more complex than that. What do you?
Jay?
Jay.
Yeah, oh, I do. I like everything that everyone's saying. I don't like cults, but I would just say that cults have been like the hallmark of human history for the last 500 years, especially since printing presses and religions. And the way that you deal with them is you try to integrate them into society, and you have a liberal principle of tolerance. But to your point about, it is one of the weird things about the normalization, the way we internalize that there's like a left wing and a right wing position on everything, even when there's not, we like create one because we have that mindset. One of the big things in higher education is the need to get more conservative viewpoints among the professoriate. I actually think this is a legitimate problem, and I think we should do it. But it comes at this huge risk of you start saying, oh, well, you have to balance conservatives with liberals, and you get into all this, and you create this artificial kind of battle line and trench line system. So on the one hand, I guess it's a balancing act. We do need to have more tolerance and diversity of perspectives, but we need to do so in order to get away from the idea that that's normal, and that's the way that we should structure our society. So the way you said it, I think, is great. Lots of different ideas on all issues. It's not just that there's two. I'm sorry, I don't know if the students want to jump in on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with you. I think where we get lost is there is hurt and not hurt, There is like making someone angry and respecting them. There is validating someone's opinion and ruining the rest of their day, you know? Like, those things exist too, and human emotion doesn't exist on this, like, black and white spectrum either. And so I feel like, yes, there are problems. They don't have blanket solutions. There is no A and B. But there is those moments when people turn off, and there is moments when people disengage and they don't want to continue the conversation. And so I think we just have to acknowledge, too, that the human emotion and the way we feel about things and the way people say things to us or look at us when you're, like, walking down the street and you're like, why'd you look at me like that? I think all of those things are important, too. And it's not just about, like, whether you agree or disagree. I think it's also, like, how did you make that person feel? And are you okay with how you made that person feel?
I know, Dr. Sexton, you mentioned being a part of like some sort of civic group, like a church or a union. One of those for me is sitting down and eating family dinner. And I grew up getting smacked in the hand if I didn't have a napkin in my lap, or used the wrong fork by my mom because you need to have manners. And a big one was don't talk politics at the table. And that I've always despised that rule, because I don't think it's don't talk politics at the table. I think it's don't talk politics rudely at the table. You don't gain and grow you don't gain new ideas and grow your own without hearing others. And I think right now we have social media and news that we get in our own lane, and I'm guilty of it. I'm sure everyone else up on here is guilty of the same thing. We sit and we look at what we agree with, and that's it. And you don't learn and grow. Right here is amazing.
And part of that too, Bennett, is what we're being fed, what the
Yes.
algorithms are feeding us. So it just becomes this perpetual thing. So we have to start to think critically and know where we can research and get our facts. And that gets back to the whole point about maybe there not being two sides. Well, there are facts and then there are not facts, okay? And we can't even agree on the facts anymore. And part of that is because we're not cognizant of where we're getting the information from and whether that information is actually a trusted source. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I think calling it a cult isn't helpful. And for me, I had to step back and stop calling things cultish or barbaric or whatever it is, because if I want to reach people, like if you think about it as a line, 30%, you've got 15% on each end. I'm somewhere in the middle, most people somewhere in the middle, right? You got 70% of us in the middle. And if you start talking about it as a cult, people just get every defensive wall to build up. And that's why curiosity and like wondering and how did you get there? And what did you read that got you to say that? And they may not change on day one, the first conversation, but like maybe they'll realize, oh, at least she actually wanted to try and talk about it.
Right. Words matter. Words matter. The choice of words matters. Go ahead.
I have right here a great example of why bipartisanship is so important and why politics should not matter. I want to introduce someone to you. Stand up. This is Mr. Greg Willard. The hardest thing I ever did in my life, I was in charge of President Bush's funeral. And if you think that's hard, it's awful. This is the man who taught me how to do a presidential funeral. He was in charge of Gerald Ford's funeral. And he taught me how to do a funeral, President Reagan's chief of staff, but you were the best. And here's what he's doing now. So I taught President Carter's chief of staff how to do a funeral. And she called me and said, the Biden people need help. And I told them, you need to talk to the woman who taught me, and that's Jean Becker. And so I've been talking to the Biden people, but I said, you need to talk to the man who taught me how to do a funeral. And I turned President Biden's funeral person over to you. Thank you, Greg. And he's paying it forward, and I'm just honored that he came tonight. Thank you, friend.
Oh,
But,
thank you for sharing that.
you know, again, this is how it's supposed to work.
Exactly.
Did I say to President Carter's chief of staff, no, he's a Democrat. By the way, I grew up a Democrat. I said, I'm not going to help you. Well, no. And did Greg say, I'm not going to help President Biden's person? You got them all straightened out? Okay, good. All right.
Yes.
About, so my background is in human resources, and so I was the HR director at the library forever, and we always say, I feel like in HR, the world is very gray. Like, you cannot live in sort of a black or white world in HR, because there are really nice people that are horrible employees. And then there are horrible employees, you know, like that you've got both sides there. And so I think you have to approach people as you have more in common that you don't, and start with that. And then you also have to give people grace. Like, backing people into a corner never works, ever. It doesn't work in HR, it doesn't work in arguments, it doesn't work. You have to give people space to get away. You know, that's kind of an HR philosophy, that if you're having a difficult conversation with an employee, you should not back them into a corner. Like, it is not a good place to go, because what will they do? They'll fight.
Yeah.
They'll fight you. So you have to really give people grace and give them the space to be a good person who you don't agree with. And
Grace is one of my favorite words.
yes.
And I'm so glad you.
And we all need to give
yeah.
ourselves some grace, because
Yeah.
give yourself some grace too.
Thank you, Kristen.
Hi, I have a tendency to yap, so feel free to cut me off.
Okay. Thanks for the warning.
I am curious what you all think of the shift in the Overton window, which is like the shift of what is considered the middle ground. Like, if you look at what people said 20 years ago, especially about immigrants or about international relations, it feels wildly different than what our elected officials are saying in the present day. Mind you, 20 years ago, I was like this big, so.
So what are their thoughts about that?
And
shift in the
also
Overton window?
on the paradox of intolerance, that one has to be intolerant of intolerance. Like, it's been a while since I studied history, but Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, they were very staunchly into seeing the humanity, especially Frederick Douglass, obviously.
Okay, all right, I'm going to cut you off now, okay?
Okay,
But I think, that's
appreciate
okay, that's okay. I think it's a good question, though, and Jay, I'm going to let you start that. No, don't say you're sorry, you're good. It's
Yeah,
all
no, I
good.
mean, it's a great question. I mean, I would just say that, when I look at the political possibilities of the present moment and think about it in a historical perspective, it seems like it's a really pregnant moment, that there are real possibilities, because most Americans tend to agree on some of these wedge issues, but they're split and fractured in different parties. There's a possibility to bring them together and to create a new coalition and to get off of this treadmill. I'm really optimistic about that happening in the near future. Really, as soon as we can all exit stage left and get these students and the next generation in charge of things, because for as bad as it is that they grew up on social media and stuff, I don't think that they are in the same kind of doom loop cycle that my generation is. So over to you guys to solve the problems.
I don't claim the doom. I don't claim it, sorry.
You mentioned that sort of the index of what's centrist, and I talked about earlier us learning and growing. I'm sure all of you have seen a lot of the politicians learn and grow into their roles. And I know, like, for example, President Biden has changed his opinions on a lot of things since he was a junior politician coming up in American politics. And I think a lot of times we're quick to say, oh, he was like this back then. But, him or other politicians aren't like that now. They've learned and grown. And I think it's an issue when we pull just off of change and not look at, okay, was that change positive? We're just saying change is bad.
Linda, can we, I don't want to cut off our panelists because you're brilliant, but I think we're running out of time. And I've promised this gentleman we would have time for his question.
Yes, please.
So, sir, you have the honor of asking the last question. Are you ready?
I hope. This is in reference to the question that Linda posed earlier about how divided is this nation? And my follow-up question to that is, why is the nation divided at all? And then in reference to banned books, Jay stated that bad ideas should not be banned, to which I'm in agreement. But then there's a concerted effort to ban books on Black history. And Black history is not a bad idea. And this administration is putting forth an effort to ban books, have books removed from schools and libraries, especially those that are relating to Black history, and an effort to close the Smithsonian Institute, National Museum of African American History and Culture. So that goes back to my question as to one of the reasons, why is this nation divided?
Well, you saved the easiest question for last. Okay, Jay, who wants to?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's going to be one answer in a pluralistic, diverse place like the United States. I think there's going to be a lot of big answers. But I would just say that I would guess when historians look back 50 years from now to try to answer that question, they will not focus first on the actual politics and the politicians and the leaders. They will think more structurally about some of the changes in society, the erosion of civic institutions, the decline of the family unit, decline of the family dinner. I loved that point. All those sorts of structural changes, I think, have destabilized the country. But on banned books, that's exactly why, because if you ban bad things, then the opponent, the guy you don't like, will ban good things. And that's why you kind of have to have an across-the-board tolerance and opposition to the banning of ideas or the muzzling of free speech.
Absolutely. Okay, it is time for us now to move to the conversation portion of the event.
Linda, I have a
yes.
very quick PS. This is how outrageous the banned book thing has become. There is a school district in Texas that has banned the book that the 43rd president, George W. Bush, wrote about his father, George H.W. Bush. Now try to figure that one out. I mean, that's just plain stupidity. Maybe that was not good civil dialogue. Okay.
And thank you very much, Jean. Okay, so first of all, may I get a round of applause for our panelists? You're all amazing. The panelists are now going to come down, and one of them might join your table. They're going to join a table, and they're going to participate in the discussions that we're about to have now. So first thing is, among your tables, we need one person at each table to agree to be sort of the timekeeper facilitator, okay? That person will keep time according to the guide, and that person will read some of the instructions that you're going to be given as we move forward. So you have a conversation guide in front of you, and what I want to go over with you very quickly is about how we are to engage with each other. We've talked about this a little bit already. You want to be curious, there's that word, curious, and listen to understand, not refute. Listen to understand the other person's point of view. Show respect and suspend judgment. Note any common ground as well as any differences. Be authentic, another word we heard earlier, and welcome that from others. Welcome that authenticity from others sitting across from you. Be purposeful and to the point. Own and guide the conversation, okay? General agreements that we all are going to follow as you have this conversation. So again, one person at each table. You all have a designated person at your table now who's going to be the timekeeper and ask the questions in each round. Somebody volunteer, okay? And then that person is going to read what you're to do in each round. Okay, at the very end, we'll take about 5 minutes to go around to a few of the tables and get some of your feedback and what you just heard and learned from the conversation. Okay, so our panelists are going to come down, and you should be deciding who's going to do what now, and then you've got 3 minutes for your first section, which is introducing yourselves, why we're here. In one breath, you're going to share your name, where you live, and what drew you here. So get started. just listening. One minute to finish this introductory round. Okay, you should be moving now away from the introductions into the first question round. This conversation includes answering prompts without interruption and having time to explore what you heard from others in the group. Keeping time helps to equalize power dynamics. The host or participant can keep time and let others know when they should wrap up. So if you're keeping time at your table, make sure everybody knows, okay? So each participant can take 1 minute to answer one of the 3 questions. So facilitator at the table, you can read those questions and then keep time. keeping track of time. We're good.
I was just saying that. Want to stop it? I know.
I did not want to stop.
I was so happy how involved, everyone wanted to ask questions.
Yes.
I love when that happens.
Great questions, too.
Yes,
Really
that
great
is nowhere. Like I said, it's on 6:30 to 8:30, so people are expecting that.
Good.
The catering, they're all set up, so whenever.
Perfect.
Yep.
I think we're going to probably go till about 10 after.
Love it. Okay. Yeah.
You said 10. I was like, oh.
Just
kidding. Yeah, no.
No, that
You're
sounds
great.
Yeah.
No, that's great. No, this
Yeah.
is fantastic.
I mean, the way the questions went, I bet they got more.
It is, and the turnout is amazing. This is
So
so
happy.
good.
So happy. And it just shows people, they want to do this.
All the comments coming in, yeah, there's like, this is wonderful that you're having this, so, yeah.
He cannot either understand why I have my friends in the car.
I feel bad. Two more minutes to wrap up this round. 2 more minutes to wrap up round 2. You should be on round 2. You should be on round 2. You should be finishing up round 2.
We got ahead of ourselves. No, it's not. Round one. We're
Excuse
ending
me.
round one.
I'm sorry, round 1. You should be finishing round 1. Hello, sorry. Okay, you should be finishing up round 1 in about another minute or so. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay. You should be moving on now to round 2, which is exploring the topic healthy communication. You should do this in about 20 to 25 minutes. The volunteer should read the paragraph about what it is you're to do. And then everybody should take 2 minutes to answer the question without interruption or crosstalk. Okay, you have 2 minutes to wrap it up before we finish up. Okay. I am now going to ask you to finish your conversations. And Jean's going to come up here and join me. And we're going to come around for the next couple of minutes and get a little bit of feedback and ask one person at a table in one breath to share something that you're taking away from the conversation that you had at your table.
Hey, Linda?
Yeah.
Can we start with my table back here?
You sure can. Go
Because
for it.
they were brilliant.
Okay.
Okay, I confess this is my nephew. But
Okay.
the whole table was brilliant.
Okay.
I would
One
say
takeaway.
the majority of the table was much more brilliant than I was. I think kind of the key takeaways from our conversation is that, and it meandered, so I'm sorry, this is a great thing, but we meandered to other topics. Maybe others did too, but there was definitely a connection of humanity here, which I think was a wonderful thing. So it wasn't about a concern or something, it was us connecting on conversations about, you know, US government, but also Pop-Tarts. Literally, both of those things came up. So being able to do that and have intentionality to do it, I think were a couple of big takeaways from here.
Love it. Thank you so much. Okay, who wants to give me a takeaway? I'm going to voluntold you.
Thank you. We was preaching to the choir, and we finally came around to the humanity part of what's going on in the world and the lack of humanity, and specifically the three things that we talked about was sympathy, empathy, and compassion, and how that enters into the discussion on a worldwide scale.
Thank you. Jean?
Okay, who over here? Do I have a volunteer table over here? Anybody? Okay, we have a volunteer. All right.
We decided to discuss what gives us hope about the United States and what we're most concerned about. And we decided that, first of all, these two young people who are here tonight as part of the panel give us a great deal of hope, as young people in general do. We see a lot of political involvement, a lot of caring. I mean, you know, most of us, well, not all of us, are of a certain age here, perhaps. And so it was important for us to feel the youth of America will save us to some extent, but we'll help you. We'll help you. Secondly, what really makes life difficult and concerned is many people felt that many of our government institutions just are not functioning. They're not doing their job. They're not doing what they need to do. So we know we need to work on that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I agree with you about the hope our young people give us all the time.
Hey, so what we decided at this table is that communication is really, really hard. A couple topics came up, and you know, someone knew something, someone knew a little bit something else, and someone knew something else. So just trying to put all those pieces together. Communication is hard. And the other thing, I just have to set my tribe. I'm an UMSL grad.
So glad to hear that. Jean?
Anybody, okay, this side of the room.
Yes.
Come on, who?
Okay, I've got somebody right here.
Okay, go ahead.
You snooze, you lose.
Yeah.
Hi. One of the things that we discussed was how if you keep digging down low enough on the core of an issue, you can find agreement, because we all want healthy, happy families, for example, and we all want good education for our kids. And it's really how we get there that becomes the disagreement, and but starting with that understanding, and then also being responsible for our own reactions to negative things that we perceive as negative. How we react to that is our own responsibility.
That is a beautiful way for us to wrap this up. Thank you, because that's the absolute truth. We all basically want the same things out of life. We just might disagree on how we get there. And all of the topics and the different challenges that our country is facing, it's all about the nuance. It's, nothing is all black or white. It's not all either this or that. It's all in the middle. It's all that mushy stuff. Jean, would you come up? You've got one more. We want to come up and say goodbye.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You have 30 seconds.
We had several folks who have found community in ways to get engaged and having those conversations, finding like-minded folks, while still having discourse with those that they may not agree with, and that's really been the key for finding the place for them. I will say that I have not found a place locally where I am currently living, but I still have hope, because I know that whenever I've worked with other folks, that together on a united effort, you can find that common ground coming from both sides of the aisle. So there's hope, as was alluded to by the other table, while still recognizing we have a lot of work.
Yeah, we do have a lot of work, but this is the work. This is the core work. I mean, our leaders are going to do what they're going to do. What we have to do is to stay engaged citizens and really lean into we the people part. It's the most important part. And we have to be able to do that. And in order to be able to do that, we have to be able to talk to each other face to face. So we can't tell you how excited we are to have this room filled like this. I mean, this has been amazing, has it not?
I think this is our best civil dialogue event ever, and it's in St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean,
And
your questions, wow.
Go Cardinals. What I love about this event, and I loved it at my table back there, the great New York Times columnist David Brooks once wrote a great column in which he talked about part of our problem is we live in silos. We don't ever talk to anyone who doesn't look like us, who doesn't think like us, who doesn't live down the street. I look around this room. You all got out of your silos tonight. And I have to tell you, I learned something from every single person at my table. I sort of want to stay in touch with them.
Well, good. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, so just to wrap up, please scan the QR code and do the post-event survey. That's how we get better. We're in this for the long haul. We love doing this work, and we want to get better at it. So whatever you think we can do to get better, just give us your honest feedback. Please stay engaged with us. You can go to civildialogues.us to sign up for our newsletter. I promise we will not bombard your inbox. We only send, one, maybe a quarter, just to let you kind of know what we're doing. If you have ideas about other organizations that we can partner with to host something like this, please reach out to us and let us know. Please give a round of applause to Kristen Sorth and the entire staff here at the St. Louis County Library. Thank you so much for hosting us.
I think there's food.
And
out
there's
there.
food.
There's food.
There's food.
There's food. You don't have to go home hungry. There's food.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all so much. All right, have a good night.